The wax tablet on the table before him is half covered already, and the lamp has burned through most of its oil while he was not watching. Seneca, 60 years of age or near it, sets down his stylus and looks at his own hand as though it belonged to someone else. He has just realized, in the middle of a sentence to his friend Lucilius, that he cannot remember what he did this morning. He picks up the stylus again. He writes, in Latin that would survive him by 2,000 years, that the greater part of our life passes while we are doing badly, a great part while we are doing nothing, and the whole of it while we are doing what we ought not. This is the first letter to Lucilius, and it begins not with a greeting, but with a command. Vindica te Tibi, reclaim yourself for yourself. The man writing those words has spent decades in the service of emperors, in exile and recall, in the management of estates and the drafting of speeches, for a young Nero who is even now, somewhere in Rome, beginning to slip the leash. Seneca is wealthy beyond the dreams of the men who taught him philosophy. He is also, by his own reckoning, in the lines he has just written, robbed. The thief has been at work for 40 years, and the thief has been himself. This is the principle we shall consider tonight, not the brevity of life, which is the surface of the matter. Beneath that surface lies something Seneca will name, with unusual precision, in his letters and in his small treatise on the shortness of life. It is the theft of time, not by fate, not by the gods, not by the inevitable course of mortality, but by inattention and obligation, by the things we permit, and by the things we are not even aware we have permitted. Let us hear him state it himself in the translation of Gummere, which has held for more than a century and remains in the public hands. Continue to act thus, my dear Lucilius. Set yourself free for your own sake. Gather and save your time, which till lately has been forced from you or filched away, or has merely slipped from your hands. Make yourself believe the truth of my words, that certain moments are torn from us, that some are gently removed, and that others glide beyond our reach. The most disgraceful kind of loss, however, is that due to carelessness. 3 modes of loss. Mark them, for Seneca means each one to be felt distinctly. There is the time that is torn from us by demands we cannot refuse, by emergencies, by the obligations laid upon us by others who have claim upon our hours. There is the time that is gently removed, the pleasant erosion, the dinner that ran long, the conversation that wandered, the morning at the baths. And there is the time that simply glides away, that we do not even notice has gone until we look at the lamp and find it nearly empty. Of these 3, the third is the one Seneca calls disgraceful. The first 2 have at least the dignity of cause. The third has no cause at all. It is pure carelessness, and carelessness, Seneca insists, is a moral failure, not a misfortune. The Stoic teaching on time is older than Seneca. Zeno had taught that the present moment is the only thing we truly possess, the past being gone and the future not yet arrived. Chrysippus had elaborated on the indivisibility of the now, but Seneca, more than any of them, made of this teaching a discipline of accounting. He spoke of time in the language of property and theft. He spoke of it as a creditor speaks of a debt, or as a steward speaks of stores being pilfered from the larder. This was not metaphor for him. He believed, and he wrote, that we treat our money with more care than our hours, and that this inversion is the central absurdity of human life. No man, he says, would willingly hand his estate to a stranger. yet every man hands his afternoon to whoever happens to ask for it. To understand why this principle pressed upon Seneca with such urgency, we must understand where he stood when he wrote of it. Let us go to that table, and to the lamp, and to the years that surrounded them. Lucius Annaeus Seneca was born in Corduba, in the Roman province of Hispania, around the year 4 before the Common Era. His father was Seneca the Elder, a rhetorician of some standing, who had ambitions that his sons should rise in the imperial service at Rome. The young Seneca was sent there as a boy, was trained in rhetoric and in philosophy, and fell early under the influence of the Stoic school, though he also read the Epicureans with care and quoted them throughout his life without embarrassment. He was, by his own admission, a sickly youth. He suffered from what may have been tuberculosis or asthma, and there were periods in his early manhood when he considered ending his own life because the body seemed unfit to carry the mind. He recovered, in part by going to Egypt, where an aunt nursed him through the worst years. He returned to Rome in his 30s, entered the Senate, and began the slow climb of the cursus honorum. His talent as a speaker was such that the Emperor Caligula, who could not bear to be eclipsed, is said to have considered putting him to death, and was dissuaded only by a remark that Seneca was consumptive and would die soon enough on his own. He did not die. He outlived Caligula, and then in the year 41, under the new Emperor Claudius, he was accused of adultery with the emperor's niece Julia Livilla, condemned and sent into exile on the island of Corsica. He was there for 8 years. 8 years on a rocky island where the inhabitants spoke a language he could not understand, where the climate was harsh, where the only company was the soldiers of the small garrison and his own books. He wrote during this time. He wrote a consolation to his mother Helvia, telling her not to grieve, that exile was nothing, that a wise man carried his country in his soul. He wrote also a consolation to Polybius, a freedman of the emperor, which was less philosophical and more practical, since Polybius had the ear of Claudius and might secure his recall. Seneca was not above such calculations. He was a Stoic, but he was also a man who wished to return to Rome, and he did not pretend otherwise. In the year 49, he was recalled at the urging of Agrippina, the new wife of Claudius, who wanted a tutor for her young son, Lucius Domitius. That son would become the Emperor Nero. Seneca was 48 years old when he took on this charge. He would remain at Nero's side for the next 16 years, first as tutor, then as advisor, then as the senior member of an inner council that ran the empire, while the young emperor pursued his interests in music, theater, and increasingly in cruelty. For the first 5 years of Nero's reign, the years that the historians would later call the Quinquennium Neronis, the government of Rome was widely regarded as the best it had been since Augustus. That government was Seneca's and the soldier Burrus's and a handful of others who managed the boy and managed the empire and tried, with diminishing success, to hold the two apart. Seneca grew rich in this period. Tacitus tells us his fortune reached 300 million sesterces, an immense sum, perhaps the largest private fortune in the empire. He owned estates throughout Italy. He owned vineyards. He lent money in the provinces at high interest, and there is some evidence that his recall of these loans in Britain helped provoke the revolt of Vindica. He has been called a hypocrite for this, in his own time and ever since. He preached the simple life and lived in marble halls. He wrote on the dangers of wealth and accumulated more of it. He himself addressed the charge in the dialogue on the happy life, arguing that the wise man does not refuse what fortune sends him, but holds it lightly, that the question is not what one possesses, but how one possesses it. The defense is sincere. It is also incomplete. Seneca knew this. He wrote of his own failures more freely than most philosophers have ever written of theirs, and he wrote of them not in private journals, but in public letters that he expected to be read and copied and preserved. By the year 62, Varus was dead. Seneca's influence over Nero was failing, and the emperor's mother Agrippina had been murdered on her son's orders 3 years before. Seneca had drafted the letter to the Senate explaining the murder. He had done this. It was the cost of his position, and he paid it. He asked Nero, in that year 62, to be allowed to retire. Nero refused publicly and granted him a quiet withdrawal, in fact. Seneca returned to his estates. He simplified his household, or said he did, and he began to write the letters to Lucilius. There are 124 of these letters that survive. We do not know how many there were in total. They were composed over the last 3 or 4 years of Seneca's life. They are addressed to Lucilius Jr., the procurator of Sicily, a friend somewhat younger than Seneca and engaged in the active business of administration. They are not letters in the modern sense. They were written for publication. Seneca knew this. Lucilius knew this. The form was an established one, going back to Epicurus, whom Seneca often quoted in these very letters. But the form does not make them insincere. They are the record of a man in his final years attempting to live as he had always told others to live and finding it harder than he had said. The first of these letters is on time. This is not an accident. Seneca placed it first because he understood that no other discipline could begin until this one was in place. If you do not control your hours, you will not control your appetites, your fears, your judgments, or any other thing. The hours are the substance from which every other practice is built. Lose them, and you have nothing to practice upon. Let us read more of that first letter, again, in Gummere. What man can you show me who places any value on his time, who reckons the worth of each day, who understands that he is dying daily? For we are mistaken when we look forward to death. The major portion of death has already passed. Whatever years lie behind us are in death's hands. Mark the phrasing, he is dying daily. The major portion of death has already passed. This is not the language of fear, and it is not the language of pious resignation either. It is the language of accounting. The years that are behind you are not stored somewhere. They are not in a bank from which you might draw. They are gone. They are in death's hands, which is to say, they are in no hands at all. They are simply gone. And what you have is what remains in front of you, which is less than you think. In another letter, the 49th, he writes, "We must make haste. The enemy presses upon our rear." And in the same letter, "What fools these mortals be, to lay long plans as if they were dwellers of a long-lived land." And later, in the 101st letter, after hearing of the sudden death of a friend named Cornelius Senecio, "Let us therefore set out wholeheartedly, leave aside the distractions which engage us, and struggle with this one thing alone, lest we be left behind, as already the swift flight of time outstrips us." Notice what Seneca is doing across these letters. He is not exhorting Lucilius to work harder. He is not telling him to be more productive. He is asking him to attend, to notice, to take account. The ancient word he uses is rationem redere, which means to render an account. As a steward renders an account to the master of the estate. You are the master, and you are also the steward, and at some point, the books must be balanced. The question is whether you will balance them deliberately, day by day, or whether they will be balanced for you at the end, when there is no longer anything to be done about what is missing. In the treatise on the shortness of life, written some years earlier and addressed to his father-in-law Paulinus, Seneca had set out the theory of which the letters are the practice. He wrote there, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. Life is long enough, and it has been given to us in generous measure for accomplishing the greatest things, if the whole of it is well invested." The whole of it, not the leisure hours, not the retirement years, not the weekends, the whole of it. And he names, in that treatise, the occupied men, the occupati. These are the men whose lives are taken up with business, with patronage, with the rounds of clients in the morning and the dinners at night, with lawsuits and inheritances and the endless management of property. Seneca knew these men because he had been one of them. He describes them with a precision that comes only from intimate knowledge. He writes of the man who has no time to sit alone, who must always be in company, who fears nothing more than the unoccupied hour, because the unoccupied hour would force him to be in the presence of himself, and that presence is the one company he cannot endure. This is the theft, then, in its full form. It is not that the world takes your time, though the world does take your time. It is that you collaborate with the world in this taking, because the alternative is to sit with yourself, and you have not built the self that could be sat with. How did Seneca apply this in his own life? The honest answer is imperfectly. He says so himself. In the 27th letter, he writes, "I am not so shameless as to undertake to cure my fellow men when I am ill myself. I am, however, discussing with you troubles which concern us both, and sharing the remedy with you, just as if we were lying ill in the same hospital." He is not the wise man speaking down. He is the patient in the next bed, holding out his own prescription. But there are particulars we can point to. In his retirement, after 62, he reduced his household. He ate simply, often only bread and figs and a little water. He bathed in cold water as a matter of practice. He walked. He read in the early morning and wrote in the late afternoon, and he set down the hours of his day with an attention that he had not given them in his decades at court. He attempted, in the time he had remaining, to live as he had written that one ought to live. He kept, by the practice of the letters themselves, a kind of nightly accounting. The Stoic exercise of reviewing the day before sleep was old. Pythagoras had taught it, and the Stoics had taken it up. Seneca describes his own version of it in the dialogue on anger. He writes, in Stuart's older translation, "When the light has been taken away, and my wife has fallen silent, aware as she is of my habit, I examine the entire day, going through what I have done and said. I conceal nothing from myself, I pass over nothing." He asks himself, on this nightly accounting, what fault he has cured today, what vice he has resisted, in what respect he is better. He notes that the spirit, examined in this way, is allowed to praise or rebuke itself, and he says that he uses this audit freely. This is the practical form of the principle. The reckoning is not theoretical. It is conducted in bed, in the dark, before sleep, by a man who has had a day like any other, and who is asking of it not whether it was productive, but whether it was attended to. Whether Seneca was always honest in this audit, we cannot know. He was capable of self-deception, as all men are, and he knew it. But the practice itself is what he commends. The practice of stopping, the practice of looking, the practice of saying, of this hour, where did it go? And would I have given it to someone else if they had asked for it openly, knowing what I now know about how few hours remain? In the year 65, 3 years after his retirement, Seneca was accused of involvement in the Pisonian conspiracy against Nero. The evidence was thin. Tacitus, our chief source, suggests that Nero used the conspiracy as a pretext to be rid of his old tutor, whose mere existence had become a reproach. The order to die came to Seneca at his villa during a dinner with his wife Paulina and 2 friends. He asked permission to make a will. It was refused. He turned to his friends, Tacitus tells us, and said that since he was prevented from showing his gratitude to them in any other way, he would leave them the one thing he still possessed, and the most beautiful, which was the pattern of his life. He opened the veins of his arms. His wife Paulina, refusing to be separated from him, opened her own. Nero, perhaps not wishing to be doubly burdened, sent orders that she be bandaged and saved. She lived several years more, pale and diminished. Seneca's blood flowed slowly, age and his thin diet having weakened it. He took poison, which did not work. He was carried to a warm bath, where he sprinkled water on the slaves standing nearby and said it was a libation to Jupiter, the liberator. He suffocated at last in the steam of the bath. He dictated to scribes until the end. The dictations are lost. What is the structural lesson here, beneath the biography and beneath the principle? Let us draw it out plainly. Seneca teaches that time is the only real possession and that its theft is the only real loss. The Stoics held, with their teacher Zeno, that all external things are indifferent. Wealth, reputation, health, even life itself. These are preferred or dispreferred, but they are not goods because they can be taken from you without your consent. The only goods, in the strict Stoic sense, are the operations of your own reason and will. But time, Seneca insists, is the medium in which those operations occur. Without time, there is no reasoning, no willing, no virtue exercised, no judgment formed. Time is not itself a good in the Stoic technical sense, but it is the condition of every good. And time, alone among the things we are given, cannot be replaced. The body heals, money returns, reputation can be rebuilt. The hour that is gone, and there is no provincial governorship, no inheritance, no favor from any emperor that can give it back. From this comes the discipline. Attend to your hours as if they were your only inheritance, because they are. Notice where they go. Notice especially what you give them to without choosing, what slides away while you are turned in another direction. The theft by inattention is the theft Seneca calls disgraceful, because it is the theft that requires no thief. You do it to yourself with your own hand every day, and you do it because you have not yet decided that you are worth the trouble of being defended from yourself. Notice further that Seneca does not say all obligation is theft. He served in office, he held position, he answered the demands made upon him by family, by friends, by the state. He did not retreat to a garden and refuse the world. The theft is not in the obligation. It is in the unconsidered obligation. It is in the hour you give, because you did not pause to ask whether the hour was yours to give. The man who chooses to spend his morning in court has spent it. The man who finds himself in court and cannot say why has been spent. Notice further still that the discipline is not severity. Seneca was not a flagellant. He did not despise pleasure. He praised certain pleasures and partook of them. He drank wine. He kept friends. He went to dinner. The discipline is not the elimination of leisure, but the awareness of leisure, as a thing chosen, as an hour given to one purpose rather than to another. The Stoic does not refuse the dinner. The Stoic knows, while sitting at the dinner, that he is sitting at the dinner and not at his writing, and not at his reading, and not at his solitary review of his own conduct, and he has made a choice, and the choice is his. This is what Seneca means by reclaiming yourself for yourself. Vindica Tibi. The verb vindicare in Latin is a legal term. It means to claim something as your property, formally in court against another who has held it. Seneca uses it deliberately. You are bringing suit. You are the plaintiff and you are the property, and the defendant is the world and is also yourself. The judgment is rendered in the dark, before sleep, when the lamp is low, and the entry in the ledger is your own. He teaches, finally, that this discipline must begin now. Not when you retire, not when the children are grown, not when the present project is finished. Now, today, this hour, because the next hour is not promised, and the one after it is even less so. He writes to Lucilius in that first letter, "While we are postponing, life speeds by. Nothing, Lucilius, is ours, except time. We have come to the close. Let us not rush it. You have heard tonight a principle, and you have heard a man's life arranged around it, and you have heard how he tried to live by it, and how he sometimes failed. You have heard him counsel his friend from a desk on a Roman estate in the last years before the order came that he had always known might come. You have heard him perhaps more clearly than his friend did, because his friend was alive and answering, and you are sitting alone, and the words have only one direction in which to travel. The question Seneca leaves you with is not whether you are wasting your life. That question is too large and too vague to be answered, and Seneca would have said so. The question is smaller and harder. It is this: of the hours you spent today, which were torn from you, which slid gently away, and which you let go through pure carelessness, knowing better, intending otherwise, and doing nothing, can you name them? Can you, in the dark before sleep, recover them in memory, and look at each, and say what it was for, and whether you would give it again, knowing what you now know about how few of them remain? If you cannot, the practice begins tomorrow, not by changing what you do necessarily, but by noticing what you do. The change, if it comes after the noticing. The noticing is everything. And if, lying in the dark, you find that you cannot endure the company of yourself in such a review, then you have found the first thing that requires your attention. That self is the one you have been fleeing into the occupations of the day. That self is the one Seneca is asking you to reclaim. There is no other you to do the reclaiming. The lamp is nearly out. He sets down the stylus. He folds the wax tablet and addresses it, and sets it on the table for the messenger in the morning. He does not know how many letters he has left to write. Neither do you. Neither did he ever, in all his years. The not knowing is the condition. The accounting is the response. Farewell, Lucilius. Take possession of your time.